This is CXO Secrets, the podcast that takes you inside the minds of business and technology leaders and reveals the strategies behind their success. Coming up in today's show.
A lot of transformation programs fail because there's this big vision about where we want to be. Yep. We make a huge number of assumptions about where we actually are. When you start the journey, you find that actually we're not where we thought we were because there's all this shadow IT, there's workarounds, there's people's own ways of working that we never took into account. And every single step, it slows it down. And so we try and get ahead of that.
CXO Secrets is powered by EDS, going beyond connections. Find out about upcoming C-level events, experiences and insights at edsxevents.com. Ade Bamigboye, Chief Technology Officer at the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea in the heart of London. Thank you for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's Monday morning as we're recording. What does your work week ahead have in store, Ade?
Well, it's grisly. So I think I'll look at Monday morning. I have a team of strategic business relationship managers, so I'll be catching up with them. Their function is to be the kind of interface with technology and the services we offer. So I'll be looking to see any new pain points I've established, any new requirements, any new initiatives. That's pretty much key at the beginning of the week. The deeply technical stuff around kind of planning and reviewing ongoing projects. That kind of happens at the beginning of the week, so I'll be doing that this week. There's also a lot of work we do around planning non-technology projects. It's things like change management, which I'm really keen to inject into all of the work we do. So we're doing a lot of work around that. I could talk about that later. And then the one I don't like is the reactive tasks. So in our world, we have lots of vendors, lots of people reaching out directly to the councillors, the elected members. And a lot of the time we'll kind of get emails from them over the weekend saying, kind of company X spoke to us about this, or consultant Y spoke to us about this. Why aren't we doing that? Have a look. And you have to be reactive because fundamentally they are the representatives of the people that we serve. So that all happens at the beginning of the week. If I have a good week, all of the intent will be delivered, but obviously, things come in from left, right, and centre we have to deal with as we go.
Well, you have to have a plan to begin with, even if you know you're going to, if there's going to be deviations from that plan, having a plan. And Monday mornings are a great time for planning. And thank you for taking time out of your busy Monday morning, by the sounds of it, to chat with us. Today, what I want to do is to explore with you what technology leadership looks like in local government. You've given us a bit of an insight into it there, how some of the lessons that you've learned in the private sector translate into the public sector, and the real challenges of driving efficiency when you're working with taxpayer money and public accountability.
Very important.
But first of all, though, I think you've given us an insight there. Tell me about your role. What does the CTO remit entail for a London borough like yours? We in this season have spoken with Gurpreet Mukhtar, one of your colleagues over in Westminster. He's got a bit of a different remit. So as far as being a CTO in a London borough like yours, and if there's any other context you can give around CTOs elsewhere in London, your colleagues there, I'd love to hear that.
Okay, so I think the first thing to say is that the CTO remit, it can be quite broad. Across London, there's probably, 3 actual CTOs, I think, within London boroughs. Right. Across the UK, there's a handful more. So I was up at an event in Manchester, a government transformation event, running some roundtables last week, and I bumped into the CTO for Yorkshire. And we had an interesting discussion around her role compared to kind of my role. I think the reality is that the title across the various boroughs, whether they're in London or outside London, they tend to mean the same thing in terms of the scope of work. There might be slight nuances, but the actual title is really much dependent upon the local authority's journey into digital transformation. If we go back 10 years, I think it's dependent on organizational structures and how they may have changed over the last few years. So there is no specific blueprint for a local government in terms of how it structures its teams. So if you look across London, for example, yes, there's a few CTOs, but there'll be other roles that are equivalent. You mentioned Gurpreet Mokhtar at Westminster, so I see my kind of role as equivalent to his. There's other London boroughs would have a head of technology, for example. There might be other boroughs that have a head of digital innovation, and so on. And those are some roles. Fundamentally, the remit really focuses on trying to make the best use of technology. We look at the extremes. Some might focus much more on technology that is here and now. So, kind of customer call center, for example, and how you can drive, resident engagement onto a digital channel. There might be others where some of the bigger boroughs, they do a lot of their own in-house development. So they may have a bigger development team and they may have more engineering services. So that kind of gives you an idea in terms of the different nuances as you go from one CTO to another. Here, for example, in London, Kensington and Chelsea, it's one of the smallest boroughs in terms of number of residents. It's quite a complex borough because obviously we have some of the wealthiest people in the world and we have some of the people in the world that aren't in the UK that aren't so well off. So we had our challenges around that. We, like most boroughs, well, all boroughs actually, have a lot of different services which are disconnected. The role for most CTOs or most equivalent roles across the boroughs will be the same in that sense, which is try and understand our vendor landscape, try and make sure we understand the journey that we need to go on to try and make that landscape more efficient, more effective, and deliver better services, frankly, better value for money. And regardless of whether it's a CTO or head of digital transformation, et cetera, the one thing that we all have in common, I think, is this desperate urgency to filling up customer services, have a single view of resident, and to make the most out of a diminished funding pot.
One other thing I want to ask about, though, is obviously you mentioned investment there, sometimes lack of investment. One of the ways in which that can manifest itself sometimes is that you have a lot of legacy as well. So as strategic as you try to be, and you speak about vendor relationships and technology decisions, there's decisions that need to be made with regards to the technology debt and the stuff that's been sitting around in a data center in a basement, maybe for a couple of decades or so. How much of a slice of your pie does the legacy stuff have as opposed to the strategy?
I think it has probably a lot smaller than it should, if I'm being honest, because whatever we think about kind of going forward, even, look at the latest stuff. Everyone's talking about automation. Everyone's talking about data. Everyone's talking about AI. Reality is we have to plug into technology that we have now. And most of the legacy technologies we have don't allow that easily. So in terms of how much time it takes quite a lot, because on the one hand, we're trying to work out how we can kind of remove that technology from the stack, which means talking to vendors. It means talking to our procurement teams. It means talking to our members, our councillors, to try and work out an investment strategy that's really fit for the future going forward. The difficult part of it is really when we start talking with kind of procurement or legal teams. Things like how can we get out of existing contracts, or how can we have conversations with existing vendors that help kind of us work together more collaboratively to come on this journey where they genuinely either want to or are in a position to help. So there is so much thinking we do around the future and innovation, things that we want to do in that context. But as you said, it always comes back down to the difference between what we'd like to do and what we can do. So we spend a lot of time explaining what it is we want to do, but the reasons why we can't do it. But we have to do that in a way that is very positively framed, rather than say, well, it's a problem, we can't do anything. We have to really try and focus on, well, what can we do with the vendors? It means talking with colleagues across other London boroughs. It means talking with colleagues in other government departments, government digital services, for example, Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, where we have conversations about the vendor landscape and if there's anything we can do collectively across the country to gain some leverage, to go collectively to our vendors with an ask, and those sort of things go on. So it does take up a lot of time. But it has to be done. It doesn't necessarily generate a lot of value in terms of moving us forward greatly. It does generate value in terms of understanding what our real limitations are, but also what our real capacity is to actually do anything about it.
Let's take a step back from your role in local government right now and have a look at your journey in technology leadership, because as I alluded to in the introduction there, you've got a rich history in the private sector before moving into the local sector. What can you tell us about your journey to this point?
Journey to this point has been very varied, eclectic almost. I can explain why that happened later. But to start off with, I left university and kind of went to work for a blue chip company, Shell. Back in the day when you go and work for a blue chip company, and the day you arrive, you have a strategy literally maps out for you. If you're on a management training scheme around, kind of what you're going to learn, what sort of work you can be expected to do. In a way that doesn't happen anymore in larger companies. So to me, that was really great. It was an extension of university as far as I was concerned. Having gone to university and read chemistry and then IT, specifically AI, going into that kind of environment, a lot of training around business, finance, projects management, projects leadership, cultural leadership in a multinational company as well. Very important. They were the ones who sponsored my corporate MBA, and that was very, very different to any kind of learning that I had been on up to that point. One of the things it did introduce me to was the world of technology consulting. So large blue chip company, did a lot of work with technology consulting companies. So I ended up going to work for one of the companies that supplied technology consulting to Shell. It was PA Consulting as it was at the time, but that was a different world entirely. Much more in a kind of energy around the driving results, because obviously you're charging fees for certain projects they have to deliver, much more demand from partners in terms of making sure you deliver value, quality for money. You're accountable for recommendations you're making. So I spent about 3 years doing that. But even as part of that, got introduced to the world of new and emerging software companies, mostly in the US at the time. And that kind of screens as kind of startup world. So had a few years working in a world where everything was, kind of boots and braces. It was startup. It was temporary offices. It was, you have to do absolutely everything for yourself. Nobody books your travel. Nobody buys your laptop. Nobody configures it. You don't have a help desk you can go to, which actually was quite dynamic.
There's nothing like it. Nothing like it.
No, it's a fantastic environment. And again, it's one of those things you learn a lot in a very short space of time. You just have to get on and do things. So I became, when we kind of closed that down, became an independent consultant for a long while actually. So that took me into lots of different industries. So I spent time in legal tech, working for some Magic Circle law firms, spent some time in kind of retail, doing sort of global mobility strategies, spent some time in the automotive industry, working on global strategies to deliver mobility into vehicles and things like that. So a lot of the stuff I had learned over the year kind of went into that. The role in local government, which brings me now, was one of those roles where I saw it as an opportunity to take every single vertical that ever works in, healthcare, automotive, publishing, legal, and bring it into a single wrapper effectively. So you look at local governments, we offer lots of different services: healthcare, housing, education, transport, and so on. And all of those areas I've kind of worked in over a period of time. This is the role where it's, okay, I've got an opportunity to connect the dots, as it were, and to try and deliver some value from my experience. That sounds a bit not so humble, maybe, but that's kind of what I thought.
It's a real broad spectrum of experiences there, from the multinational, multicultural, multimodal organizations like Shell, all the way through to the cut and thrust of a startup where, like you say, if you want something doing, you've got to roll up your sleeves, look around the team and get it done yourself. And then the different sectors that you've worked in, from legal to healthcare to mobility, automotive, and so on. Absolutely. I can see the thread, not a single thread, but the accumulation of those different experiences puts you in a really good position then when you move to local government and you are responsible partly for delivering a whole swathe of services to the citizens, to the businesses of the borough there. What would you say, is there a single lesson, a single thing from culturally perhaps from your work in private sector that you try to carry forward into your work in public sector now, whether it is the agility or just getting things done or the fighting through the the obstacles. Is there a thing that you've tried to bring with you?
Yeah, I think the thing I do try to bring is in private sector, you have a lot more autonomy around kind of delegation and but also you have a lot more expectation. So when you delegate as a leader, you kind of say, okay, I'm delegating a particular set of tasks to a group of people. They're in my team. I know they're just going to go and get it done. I know that if there's an issue, they'll raise it with me. I know we'll sit around and work together, try and resolve it. So sort of coming into this role is one of the things I kind of try to work on the basis of, happy to delegate, happy to support. But from a cultural perspective, and it may just be uniquely this council, it may be there's a few others like this, local government, very, very hierarchical in its decision-making and in its flow of information. This whole notion that the kind of CEO, for example, can speak to someone in the dev team. I mean, obviously, it's local government, but isn't something that kind of manifests well in local government. You kind of go down through the chain of command. The issue there, obviously, is as you go down through the chain of command, things get lost in translation or things get lost differently. So by the time we get someone wanting to act, to do something in response to a request from a senior leader, it may well be different in terms of what they do, and then the outcome is different. The thing I have tried to bring on the journey is, kind of just give everybody a bit of confidence to let them know they can make those decisions. If they're not certain, if they're not clear, then they need to ask. But what I found initially, there was a lot of, kind of waiting for the regular, kind of weekly catch-ups, at which point it'd be, okay, I'd be asking a question, kind of where are things working, where are not things working. It took me quite a while to go through I actually don't care if things are working properly. That's how it should be. The things I can help with, in fact, the things I want to help with, are where there's a blocker or where there's something troubling you or you're not making as much progress as you want. So it kind of works with some people, many people who haven't probably been in public sector for so long, but it's not pervasive. So it's something we're still working on in terms of trying to bring the way I've worked in private sector into public sector. I've still got some work to do there, a lot, I imagine. So culturally, it is about people kind of just wanting to get on and do things. It's about people feeling they're empowered to do things. It's about people not worrying about whether they make a mistake. Yeah.
Empowerment leadership there, empowering your teams to do their best work and to be to feel that whenever they need to communicate challenge, issue, obstacle, opportunity, whatever, that the door is open for them to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes the culture is at odds with that for all of the reasons, and then coming in and trying to create a culture where that door, where workforce does feel free to challenge also as well as necessary.
And actually, I think one of the things that's probably worth pointing out is there's a level of curiosity as well that I think we need to inject into our culture. So in again, where I've used to kind of the sectors I've been in, and the way I've worked to be avoided with, there is a natural curiosity. So the fact that I work in the legal sector wouldn't stop me going to conferences about AI and medicine, for example, or wouldn't stop me about going to conferences or talking to people about automation in engineering, because fundamentally for me it's about understanding technology capability and different ways of deploying it. In local government, I think it's you've got a lot of people in local government who spend their career in local government 10, 15, 20 years, and the curiosity that drives them to look outside local government is not there in the way that I would like it to be there. Even if you look at, say, the extended industry, and by that I mean local government is local government, you've got central government, you've got government digital services, you have the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. These are all government bodies. They all work on innovation and improving efficiency and generating value out of the public purse. But again, from a local government perspective, it isn't the natural inclination for leaders and kind of people in the various teams to go to these conferences or to spend time looking in any detail at what those bodies are doing. And yet, if we look at government digital services, if we look at science, innovation and technology, the work they've been doing over the last 5 years to really try and lift up the whole of the UK is actually quite astounding. If we look at where they were, sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago to where they are now in terms of the things they're talking about, the lessons they're learning and promoting and sharing. And so, curiosity, I kind of would like to find a way to ensure that everybody in local government has a natural curiosity that makes them think, I'm going to go and have a look. What can I learn?
And continuing on that theme of change, you mentioned how much things maybe have changed over the last handful of years or so, and your role in that in driving that change, maybe away just from the core technology itself. And it's interesting, we've barely spoken about technology today.
Oh, yeah.
Beyond the technology, is there an overriding objective that you've been set, or maybe a mission that you've set for yourself, perhaps, that helps to steer how you do or what you do there? What is the thing, if there is one, that you are trying to change or trying to drive?
I would say there's a couple of things, not specifically one thing. So the two things specifically, one of the very first things I did when I arrived here is to introduce an ADKAR and ProSci methodology for change into my tech teams. So within my team, I have a group of colleagues who are tech consultants. So their job, historically when I arrived, was to help colleagues around the organization make the best out of the technology they've got. So that would be things like, okay, how do they kind of use Excel more efficiently and using macros? How do they use SharePoint more efficiently, et cetera, et cetera? But what I said to them at the time is, you're really going to change your role. It's going to be tech consulting. So it's not only doing that, but it's going to colleagues in organizations saying, actually, now you've been using Excel, you've been writing macros. Now we've got Copilot, right? So why don't I take you on this journey to deploy Copilot? And starting from a standing start, you have 400 Copilot users, for example, and it's a lot for local government, because all of those use cases are use cases where we have kind of worked to make sure, the colleagues won't use it just for the sake of it. There has to be value. So they're using it across everywhere, kind of all their office products. So the thing that really drove that was the ADKAR change methodology. It really focused on individual. So rather than come in and do a big corporate transformation, corporate change program, the idea is, as technologists, our job is to try and, within our limits, inject technology and make sure our colleagues are using it in the best way they possibly can, and to bring in technologies that we know will help them. Now, because of the things we talked about earlier around culture, resistance to change, and people being really accustomed to working the way that they want to work, the whole idea of ADKAR, the going in position is, okay, the very first thing we're going to do is check at an individual level what level of awareness they have around the need to change. So we'd be talking to colleagues in an organization about, well, you've been doing this in this way for a long time. Kind of, you look 2-3 years ahead, we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be automating things. The work you do won't exist. So we need to check their awareness of that. Once we've done that, we go in and we look at their desire. Do they want to be part of the journey? Do they not? If they do, we can start to think about, okay, we're bringing in this technology. What kind of learning and development do we need to provide them with? If they're not, it gives us immediate access to a list of blockers. What is going to stop this particular initiative from being successful, just in terms of people? Because obviously, in any change program, it is people's resistance to change that slow things down and ultimately kill it dead. So we kind of tackle that at the beginning. So, in a specific question you asked was around, kind of what is the overriding mission? For me, the overriding mission was to, let's not embark upon deploying technology for the sake of it. Let's make sure we focus on where it's going to be useful. I think loads of leaders want to do that. But actually, let's make sure we bring our colleagues with us on that journey, and we'll use it to identify where we need to help people. That we'll also use to identify where there's going to be blockers, because we can get ahead of that and kind of, I was going to just sweep those aside before they become, kind of intractable problems. And then the second thing was really making sure that we talk about government transformation and local service transformation and co-design a lot, but we don't truly understand the services we deliver. We know what we are meant to deliver. We are meant to deliver social services. We are meant to deliver adult social care. We're meant to deliver housing and management and all these sort of things. But actually, there is a difference between what the director of services say we should do and how we should do it. And we saw the strategy. This is how we run this particular service, and the difference between what actually goes on the ground. So when you talk to the colleagues who are delivering the service, we mentioned legacy systems. We've got colleagues who are quite innovative. They've found their way to deal with the legacy technology that doesn't support them. Now, a lot of the time, it means things like, kind of shadow IT. It means they've got workarounds that aren't documented anywhere. So my mission was to, let's map out all of the processes in terms of they actually happen. And then let's work out where all the workarounds or the shadow IT where all the inefficiencies are. Let's do our co-design, kind of future-facing services on the basis of what actually goes on rather than what we think goes on, because it gives us a more secure route from going from the as-is to the to-be. Because again, a lot of transformation programs fail because there's this big vision about where we want to be. Yep. We make a huge number of assumptions about where we actually are. When you start the journey, you find that actually we're not where we thought we were, because there's all this shadow IT, there's workarounds, there's people's own ways of working that we never took into account. And every single step, it slows it down. And so we try and get ahead of that curve. So those are the two things, if anything, that I kind of made my mission alongside the traditional, I'm a CTO.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Understanding what is actually on the ground, particularly when you're trying to transform it. If you don't know what that as is really is, then how can you develop a pathway to get to your to be? Finally, and unfortunately, just for time, probably very quickly, a lot of conversation around the world, rightly so, in many ways, about driving efficiencies in local government, trying to make sure that the taxpayers' money is being as well used to deliver the services that we've spoken about as efficiently, as effectively, as cost effectively as possible. Yeah. I'm curious what your take is, particularly as regards to the role that AI has to play in that, because there's various stats from, but various bodies, consultancies, government bodies about the role that AI could play, how much value AI could play in savings around local authorities. What's your take when it comes to driving efficiency in the role that maybe AI, maybe automation in a more general sense can play where you are?
So the reference I tend to use is the Local Government Association. They published a report back in the summer, talks about the numbers of people in employment in local government, kind of 1.8 million people across the United Kingdom who work full-time in local government. There's probably hundreds of thousands or more who work in our extended ecosystem with our partners that have a direct bearing on the range and quality of service we deliver. There's also figures in there that suggest that about 15% of the tasks or the work that has been done can be fully automated, using simple technologies like we've got today, Copilot, Power Automate, things like that, which I think is probably true. And then going over we kind of look ahead the next 2 or 3 years, there's probably another kind of 25 to 35% of the work that people do that can be mostly automated, or can be, the manual elements of it can be reduced quite substantially. Also, there's an assumption behind the scenes that the data is in a good place, so we have to make that assumption. There's an assumption behind the scenes that we understand the workflows, hence my kind of drive to map out the processes that are actually happening rather than what we think. So I think in terms of AI, if we take a 2-3 year view, I think it'd be actually quite profound at the automation level, at the kind of digital services, in terms of kind of just automating a lot of engagement with residents, kind of just doing it in the background. We think kind of Amazon or any kind of shopping experience like that, where you can just simply kind of buy things quite quickly. You get your everything, the whole of the retail cycle, selection, basket, payment, refunds, all of that is very slick, all automated. I can see a situation where we can do something similar in local government, but of course all the services have to be joined up. That will have a profound effect in terms of people's current work. There'll be people who are doing work today that we just won't need. There'll be people who are doing work who will become a hell of a lot more efficient because they'll be using technology to drive that, and they'll be able to do more. So that's the positive side of it. I think there's another side of it, which is to do with making sure we are operationally resilient. And I think there's not enough discussion around that. If you deploy AI and automation quite widely, you're impacting a lot of people across the whole of the UK from a resident perspective. If things start going wrong, like AI goes rogue, and you have to turn it off, you don't have a huge amount of time to fix it, retest it, redeploy it, before the backlog of services has some dramatic impacts on people. So there is that bit, and I do talk to our resilience team about how we can be a bit more operationally resilient. They talk about people in the loop for checking things. So there'll be a bit a loss actually, in deploying AI going forward, where we've got the technology, we know how it's impacting people. We have to start focusing on how we make sure it is operationally resilient. Scalable is easy, but you need to build in that resilience, and that requires skill sets that we don't have to. So a specific example would be in social services, you need people who can assess any recommendation that AI is making, work out quite quickly if it's within bounds, within the remit of what they would expect, even if it is not something they've come across in terms of recommendation, and be in a position to say, actually, we need to slow down our stop because I'm not sure the outputs we're getting are reasonable, accurate, or expected. But then you have to quickly go through that cycle of assessing what's coming out, checking if there's a valid reason for it. If there's not, working out what we need to do to get back on track. So those are skill sets that need development downstream.
That's not a quick process. That really isn't a quick process,
Not a quick process.
In terms of building that trust, but building the platform, like you say, in terms of knowing what's on the ground right now, getting the data in order here, and then developing confidence in the outcomes, whether it is the Amazon, like I want this, and 2 of those, please, and they will arrive next day. Brilliant. But if you've got a lot of AI and automated processes driving that, you need to be confident that it's going to work at scale, at pace.
Absolutely.
And then, like you say, what happens if one of the wheels does fall off the Formula One racing car? What are you going to do? You're going to have people trying to run at 120 miles an hour around the course until the car's got all of its tyres back on again. That's the operational resilience piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be quite urgent. Otherwise, we'll get to a point where we've got all this innovation ready to go, but can't scale it. So not a great use of public money, actually, if that happens.
Well, thank you for chatting us through that and for really helping us to understand more about the remit of a CTO, the very broad remit of a CTO in local government and the different stakeholders, the different levers that you have to pull and what it is that you are trying to drive there. There's so many more conversations that we could have another day, and I hope that we get to have those in terms of scaling what you're doing there, in your borough across the whole of the country. You've spoken about technology procurement as well. There is strength in numbers in all of these, yet sometimes when you are operating in local governmental silos, then there are limitations there. I know there's lots of conversations, broader conversations, to try and grow that strength. But we'll have to have those another time. Before I let you go, though, there are some quick questions that we ask all of our guests. This show is called CXO Secrets. What is your secret? Put your modesty to one side for a moment. What's the key attribute you believe has enabled you to achieve what you have so far?
Key attribute, I think I have a high degree of impatience, pretty much, which is why I've kind of gone from industry to industry. And it used to be back in the day, you'd be called a jack of all trades, master of none. But actually, my reality is I joined a blue chip company, saw things working. The question always was, okay, starting from, kind of going in at the bottom, how close am I going to get to the chief exec role? And whether it was realistic or not wasn't an issue. It is, kind of what are the milestones I would need to go through? The minute I don't see those milestones happening, it's like, okay, I'm not being given an opportunity to do a certain project, that I can't learn a new skill, or if that opportunity just doesn't happen to be there, can't learn a new skill. I start thinking, okay, what do I need to be doing in the next 6 months? And if I can't see where I'm doing it, I can't see me doing that where I am, I've tended to move on. So it's almost like every 3 years, it's okay, fine, got to go and find myself a new challenge. And that's really the impatience, because I've always been told, well, stick around, it'll work out. But the minute someone says to me, oh, stick around, it'll work out, my alarm bells start ringing, because I don't think I'm unreasonable. Maybe that's not quite. I don't think I'm unreasonable in terms of setting expectations, in terms of I can do this, I can learn, I just need opportunities. So it's more about kind of going out and grabbing that and doing it for myself. And that really is the impatient part of me. I think I'm reasonable. But actually, I like being out of my comfort zone as well. So going from, say, legal tech into retail, where I've never been before, it forces me to learn quite quickly. And I like that, because it's just the ability to learn new skills, not the technology skills necessarily, but the business skills, the legal skills, procurement skills. So yeah, bottom line, it's impatient. I like to learn. I like to be in an environment which is dynamic. All the startup environments we spoke about taught me that is what I like. A bit different from local government, right? Because not a startup environment. There's a lot to do. And there's a lot of opportunity. So it's the opportunity part that brought me out.
We do a pass the question here where guests on the show have an opportunity to put a question to a future guest, whoever they may be. And we have a question for you from a previous guest on the show, Dave Hoon, CTO at Norseman. And they asked this question.
What workload have you considered in your organization to move from a centralized cloud or SaaS environment out to the edge?
I think I'm going specifically in the context of local government. That's an easy question, none whatsoever. And it's really to do with the fact that we're on a journey. We're still moving things into a cloud, kind of SAS, kind of software as a service, platform as a service. I think just local government generally has a lot of work to do to understand how it works, how we manage it, how we monitor it, how we control it, especially around cost controls. And I think we're quite relatively immature in that journey. And things like financial operations in the cloud are kind of relatively new terms to local government. So in terms of deploying things out to the edge, we're not ready.
Ade, thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us today. And thank you very much for joining us on CXO Secrets. Great to chat.
Fine, thank you.